Namaste.
Namaste.
And where are we?
We're in our new annex at Urban Sadhu Yoga on 275 Grove Street, Jersey City, New Jersey. And Catherine and I are conducting our 75-hour yoga teacher training that you learn to teach the Urban Sadhu Yoga Express class. So Catherine's sitting in on our talk today and joining in and collaborating with us. And so it's kind of exciting because it's like new energy.
New energy, it's new loca.
No
new location. Yeah. I remember taking yoga classes in this space when it was owned by Yoga Shunya, and it's actually interesting to see this be the sister location of your main outpost on Newark Avenue.
Yeah. So we're kind of getting it geared up so that we can actually do classes. But right now, we're just for the next 5 weeks, we're just going to do this teacher training and then open up the space to the public as an annex. It's exciting to have an annex. We're gonna chant shanti. Catherine's gonna lead us in chanting shanti, and then we'll all talk about shanti together.
Sounds great.
So Om Shanti. Take a deep breath in through your nose. Deep, sweet, even exhale out. Breathing in, breathing out. Om Shanti Om Shanti Om Shanti Om. Again like that. Om Shanti Om Shanti Om Shanti So this exploration of the month, this whole month, we're focused on shanti. Shanti translates into peace, but it's interesting, right? Because I wrote this essay about 5 or 6 months ago, but with everything that's going on in the world, the volatile energy of the stock market, Ukraine. Just so much ashanti around the world, I thought now was the time to publish it and really go deep into the idea of what does peace mean.
And how does shanti differ from when we say peace in English? You know what I mean? Like, because they're two different things, right? Shanti is a mantra being a kind of mind protection, a way to transcend the habitual habits of the mind. And when I say peace to you, the first thing you think of is like maybe keeping the peace, or military, or police state, or some kind of like pushing back against something that is unpeaceful. There's a conflict. But shanti, in shanti, when you say shanti, there is no conflict. There's like the conflict has completely ceased. It no longer exists because the shanti is eternal. The conflict within yourself has been resolved. And therefore, since the conflict within yourself is solved, there is no external conflict anymore. Which is a very different idea of like saying peace. And go ahead.
I have a comment on that as well. I grew up listening to Om Shanti, Om Shanti, Om Shanti chanted in mantra. To hear it being sung like this, and this is the first time I did it was in Catherine's class last Wednesday. And there was a complete cessation for me in that moment, in that song where we united in a chorus of like, I was lost to time and space.
Yeah.
And it was almost like this transcending, I mean, we talk about the soul a lot, and this was the closest I came to feeling like that kind of union. And it came in this format, in the form of song.
Yeah.
As well. So when I think of Shanti, it was a very embodied experience of what that could possibly be, where you cease to be yourself and you are a voice in the room, merged with something else and someone else.
Yeah.
Devotion. That was the first time. It really was a resounding coming home to peace as a devotional practice.
Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt. I just had to share that.
No. And I think that, like, I mean, can you say something about like how like mantra and chanting this for you is devotional?
Yeah, I think for me, I tend to err on the side of getting very stuck in my head, which isn't a bad thing, and that mind is a tool, right? But I think there's something about the music and the chanting for me that it transcends that. It transcends the mind, and it becomes real. It's not just a concept. Shanti is good, peace is good, that sounds good, yes, I agree. But there's nothing else to say, right? It's everything, like it is, yeah.
It is a cessation of the self for a brief moment in time.
Yes, exactly. There's nothing else to say of the little self, right? Yeah. And I think it's a way to remember that. It's a way to remember that.
Yeah.
And I think that it's also important to kind of realize that in crisis times like this, where everything seems so topsy-turvy, that focusing on shanti is not a form of spiritual bypassing.
Right. That is important.
It's not. Just because you're looking for shanti, it doesn't mean you're unwilling to deal with the issues at hand. It's just you're going to approach them from the position and from the point of view of being a being that is shanti. It's that you're at peace with the fact that you have to deal with the turmoil, that you have to deal with the conflict that is real, that is has real life and death situations happening around it. You know.
I have a question on that. It's interesting that you say that, because you're asking to hold two polarities together in coexistence, right? Yet when you recite Shanti 3 times, you write in your exploration of the month, you talk about, do you want to just break down what the three shantis are, because it's implicitly biased, based on a dualistic structure.
Yes. So in Sankhya philosophy, and I talk about this in our 75-hour teacher training even, that they believe that shanti had to come from a divine place first, and then it was given to you, and then you were able to distribute it. So you were never in control of peace. And so that's a dualistic idea, that I'm incapable of actually providing true shanti because I'm not divine. As non-dualistic traditions were created, they said, well, that doesn't make a lot of sense. Shanti has to start with me internally. Peace is in me, and if I can project peace, and if I can project shanti, then I can give shanti to you. And then shanti can be spread universally, and we can create shanti throughout. But it has to start with me internally. So and that's the way that we teach it here. That first, if you want to find shanti, find it in yourself. Don't go looking for it outside of yourself, because as we can see, it's in the material world, in the world of conflict, is a lot more ashanti than shanti. And that's just the turmoil and changing nature and the volatility of the real world, right? So the yogi has to find shanti within themselves.
And like you said, it's not running away or shying away from the real turmoil, right? It's not passing over it or shrinking back from it, but it's coming back to shanti with a strength.
Yes.
Peaceful strength, even so.
And all of the spiritual activists that we admire so much, Martin Luther King, Gandhi, any of these people who were changers of society within a peaceful format projected shanti first. They were nonviolent activists. And so shanti can cause it can be the energy of great change if you let it speak through you.
It's also interesting, the power of an intention. I'm going to give a very silly story. I was walking here, and there's rainwater puddled on the sidewalks, and there's a bicycle lane here. And I was walking here, and a young man in one of those bicycles with those thick wheels, sped ahead and gave me this massive splash of water. It was dirty water. It was cold. For a second, I wanted to sprint up to him to the traffic light and be like, look what you did. Confront him, because it was so outraged. Right. And then I thought about the fact that I'm going to be sitting here with you talking about shanti. So I just saw myself stood there in the middle of the street. I composed myself. And I literally did what felt very unnatural in the moment, because I was angry.
Right.
I forgave him. And for a minute, that forgiveness did not sit well with me.
Right.
But as soon as it left me, and I lost the impulse to walk up to him and confront him, I walked down here, and the energy had dissolved.
Right.
I did not have that in my half-life to show up here. And then we joined together, and we moved into the next movement of just in a course of love, right?
Right.
So, I think there's very small ways in which we can actually exercise this.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I think that's the key too, is it's small ways. Yeah. If you can change, that's the inner connection, the inner person connection, that I'm not going to actually go out of this yoga room and get off my mat and change the world today. It's not going to work that way. I'm going to have to change it one being at a time, and my interaction with them, and my interaction has to say that I am a peaceful being. I am at peace with myself, and therefore I'm offering you that. And it doesn't mean that you're still not going to have conflict. And it doesn't mean that you're still not going to meet people who are going to challenge that, because they will sense that and they will challenge that. But you have to keep your practice of shanti and keep that state of shanti emotionally and psychologically while you're being challenged. But that's part of life, right? Life is really about rising up to these challenges and staying with equanimity of the mind.
And even if it's not an obvious material transformation, it's an energetic transformation in that moment of choosing to hold that space of non-conflict.
Yeah.
Me running up to him and having a confrontation, I mean, that could have materialized, and yes, there could have been an argument. But vice versa, the act of not engaging and the act of letting go in that moment also equally was interesting to see how quickly like you transcend into the next moment where you almost forgot.
Right. And I think that's the shanti.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean that you didn't have a disturbance and that you didn't interact.
Yeah.
But it does mean that you're not holding on to it.
Come back.
Yeah.
What is I know that Urban Sadhu, you talk a lot about non-dualism. And it is interesting that you started out the exploration by breaking this down almost in a dualistic philosophy and then being like, but we are non-dualistic, right? What did this lead, where did this open up for you in terms of when you were exploring non-dualism in this form?
I think that like the thing is important about a non-dualistic point of view is it empowers the practitioner. A dualistic point of view is always saying that I'm not really capable of any great change or that everything's always out of my control. I'm kind of a leaf blowing in the wind and I'm at the mercy of the divine or the cosmos, whatever you want to call it. Whereas a non-dualistic tradition says, no, you're in complete control of everything. You have to now step up and take responsibility. And you have to practice and channel that divine energy that's in you. That there's no separation. It's not that and you, it's you. It is the one. And so I feel like that yoga should empower people, and it should empower people not to become the ego, but really to become the compassionate beings that they're capable of being. You know.
But it also starts with sort of you almost with yoga. I think what I hear from you as well is you almost have to have a very personal and idiosyncratic journey into what that self-concept of you is, as opposed to the concept that you're given of who you should be, right? Because we all walk in from the outside.
Right.
What role am I playing? Am I the employee? Am I the consumer? Am I the American patriot? Am I the good daughter, good wife? You know, and then you come to this practice.
Yeah, and then you are looking to discover your true self, which is shanti. Or as you could call it something else. You could call it unconditional love. You could call it the well of compassion. I mean, I think isn't that what Ram Dass used to call it? He used to call it the ocean of compassion, which is the same thing as saying shanti. So it's one of those kind of things that I think we all come in with preconceived notions of who we are, and I don't think anybody walks into a yoga practice the first time thinking, I'm going to really realize who I am today. Like, that happens over time. And it happens with deep meditation and time spent evaluating the way that you're operating in the world and willing to change.
And also being at peace with your imperfection, I suppose.
Being at peace with the flaws that you have as just being human. And it's okay to have those flaws. It's okay to actually know, but once you know them, and I mean, it's also, for me, this is like a profound subject because, before I started practicing yoga, I was a very hot-headed little guy. And I still have a temper, and I have to practice to control that my little Irish temper, So, and with the practice, you can start to kind of really evaluate your thoughts, your words, and your actions, and how can you rechannel your thoughts and your words and actions to bring back about positive results and change in the world, instead of ashanti, creating more ashanti. But sometimes you realize that, yes, I'd like to really get in there and run up to the guy who splashed me with the bicycle and really chew him out. But is that just going to create more ashanti? And is it worth it? Because is that person even going to realize what they've done? And are they just going to do it again? Probably. It probably, it's kind of pointless.
Yeah.
So I think that's really what the practice does, and how the practice can transform us, but it takes time. It takes time and effort.
And I would also say that much of what you're talking about is also very counter-trend to the society we live in. It's a very brave choice. It takes a lot of commitment.
Yeah.
It's very hard to kind of espouse these ideals, I think. And so the power of a community where you're reminded of these principles, where you get a chance to practice together.
I think that that's probably one of the biggest things, is that we live in a world right now that, because of social media, that it thrives on ashanti because it's more interesting.
Yes. Right.
That's the problem. It's more interesting
Agitation.
to watch.
Yeah.
It's more interesting to watch a disaster happening than it is to watch,
Bunch of monks just praying peacefully.
Yeah,
That wouldn't make for good TV.
So it thrills people. Conflict thrills people. That's why we're glued to the television watching the Johnny Depp, divorce, court case. It's I'm not watching it because it's just it's almost unbelievable that it's even being televised, or it's a divorce case. How ridiculous is that we're actually watching somebody's private life turn into a soap opera?
Yeah.
Because people love the ashanti of it. They love the conflict of it, and then picking sides and getting involved, and and in reality, when you start to practice yoga, you really start to realize, even stuff like that, I cannot really get involved with this because it's going to suck me into its ashanti. I'm going to become is she telling the truth? Is he lying? Why is he just sitting there doodling? All that, you get into all of that, and it pulls you in. So you have to kind of say, okay, that can go on, but I'm not going to involve myself in that because that's going to disturb my practice.
Yeah, we live in a world that thrives on a dualistic separation. And in the separation, there is profit. In the separation, there is the ability to go to war. You will not be able to wage war in another country if we consider ourselves indivisible, for one.
Right.
And if a woman did not feel like something was inadequate with her body, you wouldn't have this huge consumeristic economy that markets all of these products, for instance, on how I could be a better woman, or how I could be more beautiful, or...
Yeah. And then, when we deal with situations like war, that becomes really challenging, because then there's always the question is, do yogis really believe in war? And I say you always have to look in every story about the yoga tradition, whether it's the Mahabharata or the Ramayana, there's war that takes place. That whether it's Ram or it's Arjuna and Krishna, they rise up to the occasion of the conflict, but they do it with equanimity of the mind and as a peaceful being. But they know that they have to do this to set things in order so that there's not more ashanti. So you know, it's the world has to look and see what it can do to help without creating more Ashanti. And that's where this global conflict, like Ukraine and Russia, is a real problem. Because if the West steps in the wrong way, they could just create more problems. They could create more discourse. So it's a very delicate balance, and it's a balance where the world needs more meditation, and they need more
contemplation.
Contemplation.
A sense of non-separation.
Yeah. You want to chant it again?
Sure. So chanting Om Shanti Om. And I like to think of this mantra, this tune actually comes out of a different mantra that kind of talks about death and life. And so it's always coming back to the sound of peace. What are we fighting for? What's our intention? So just breathing in, breathing out. Om Shanti Om Shanti Om Shanti Om Om Shanti Om Shanti Om Shanti
Om Shanti.
Om Shanti.
Thank you.